Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Preacher. A lot of great things went down in this episode, so let's break everything down bit by bit. One side of things, let's first talk about Cassidy's side of things, where when he wakes up, obviously he's surrounded by all those people who saved him last episode. It's like, you guys want to be vampires, but it's like being a vampire sucks, just because he's been one for so long. But it turns out the leader of the group, Icarius, is actually a vampire himself. And not just any vampire, it seems like he can do way more than Cassidy. And it's like, you've been a vampire for like a good chunk of time, Cassidy, and you've never done anything. Because it's just like, oh, Cassidy, because it never crossed my mind to think like, oh, vampire, because vampires never seemed like they were anything particular. I don't know if it's really ever been shown that Cassidy's like superhuman strong. It's like, no, essentially he can drink your blood, and he can heal fast and an aversion to the sun, and that seems to only be his thing. It didn't ever seem like he was anything special, but it seems like, nope, it turns out vampires in the universe can do stuff. They can fly, they can use compulsion, and they can also change it. Icarius in particular can turn into a cat. So I'm like, what? It never crossed my mind. It's like, oh, I guess all vampires are just like Cassidy, but it's like, no, because it's interesting because I brought up last episode. I was like, oh yeah, Cassie's never really come across any other vampires. It's like, and that girl ended up being fake. So I'm like, oh, I guess that's not the case. But it's like, no, vampires, there are other vampires, and he actually meets one. At first, he's just kind of like, oh, you're a charlatan. You're just kind of like, oh, you're such a cliche, because he's kind of like very interview with the vampire, and you have Cassidy being very, true blood, if you want to get specific about it. But interestingly enough, it's just even Cassie's like, oh wow, I'll admit I'm very impressed. So it's just kind of interesting. At first he was just kind of not, because they both are very lonely people and they want to experience. It seems he kind of brought up some interesting things, because like obviously he's like, no, you can't, because Icarius is changing all the people that are, his children of the night, and then he's like, or children of the blood or whatever, and he's like, you can't change him, that's horrible, don't do that. He's like, who's the person you changed? It was my son. Yeah, but was he a good guy? Actually, he was kind of a dick. So it's kind of like Cassidy, I would assume that's the only time Cassidy's ever turned to him. Once again, he was warned before, because it's like, what kind of person was he? And he's like, Cassidy didn't really listen. So it's like, yeah, your son was kind of a dick before, so it's kind of like, okay, he was going to be a dick as a vampire. But like for Icarius, it's like, I vet these people, they're good people, so obviously they're not going to be assholes when it comes to being vampires. So it's kind of like, all right, so he's kind of doing this vampire thing right. He got all these special abilities. But for him, it's like he wants someone else like him who's kind of lived this for a long time, not someone who's just kind of gotten turned, someone who's kind of a fan of it, just someone who was like been that for a while, because it's kind of lonely on both their parts. Because Cassidy says he's kind of all up on friends, but then there's a whole conversation he has with Tulip, which is actually very heartbreaking. And fucked up on many occasions, because it's like, oh yeah, he's actually there sitting there smoking crack. Because she's like, you're in a crack house, aren't you? He's like, no. You're smoking crack in a crack house, aren't you? And he's like, no, it's not a house. But Tulip's trying to tell him everything that's going down. Like, oh, what we didn't do, which obviously I'll get to soon enough. And it's just, for him, it's like, you can tell it hurts a lot, because it's like, yeah, these are the two people that are his friends. And he, it's not even just that. And it's something he brings up in the conversation. It's like, he's come across so many Jessies and Tulips across his life. He's come across thousands, and they'll die just like everyone. Like that's the whole aspect of this immortality thing. Those people, you get close to people and they're gone the next. Like for him, it's like, I guess he kind of let that slip his mind, especially when it came to Tulip. But I think in his mind also, it was like, no. I'll potentially turn Tulip. I don't know if that was ever going to be his intention. When she was dying, that was his intention, but I don't know if he ever planned to turn her too. He was in love with her, so I'd assume, but for him, it's like, I had friends like you so many times, so it's just kind of like, I don't hold out, because they're like, oh, when this is all said and done, we'll come track you down. We can go on the road again. It's like, no, I'm not going to wait for you guys, because that's not what I do with this life of mine. I move on, and it hangs up, and it's so heartbreaking, because, like I said, because you had Tulip trying to be like, it's kind of a little weird and awkward, especially the last conversation her and Cassidy had, so it's kind of weird, but it's like, oh, we can move past that, we can be the trio again, but it's like, that might not be the case. I am curious to see, like, when this is all said and done, maybe they'll find their way back to each other. But for now, it seems like, man, that trio is kind of broken up. They're kind of stuck in their own situation. So that's why you see Cassidy kind of go back to Icarius at the end of the episode, which is so interesting. That's all taking place at like one of the children of blood, like his grandmother's house or something like that. And she's so in the know about, well, I don't know if she knows everything, but she's like, oh, look at you got all your friends down here. She even heard about Cassidy smoking crack all day. She's like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Come on inside. Hey, guess who's here? So it's kind of interesting that, and I like that Icarius is kind of like a very gracious person, because like she's a very gracious host, so it's like, oh no, she doesn't really like when people smoke here. So it's like, it's just so interesting that that's where that storyline is going. It's so fascinating. Then on the other side of things, you had the grill side of things with Hare. So the conversation hits multiple parts. For one, it's like him and Hoover, it talks about the whole situation and what he wants out of this. By putting Jesse in power, like I said, he's going to be the next man in power. He's going to be the right hand to the man in power. Like, like that will give him access to a lot of power. It's kind of what he's all like, as he said it himself, this is like a coup essentially, because it's like the Allfather wants things run with like Humperdinck at the forefront, but it's like, obviously, Hare doesn't want that, because for him, it's like he wants someone capable at the wheels, and he wants to be there to help whip the world back into order. I even love that Hoover brings up questions. He's like, yeah, the Allfather seems more fat than scary, which is kind of what I commented on the last episode. It's like, the fact of the matter is, that speaks volumes that even Hare was scared of him. And I was like, that speaks volume. And he's like, oh, you shouldn't underestimate. He makes me kind of look like nothing. And it's like, oh yeah, he sat on a dude's head until it bust open because a dude touched his hot pocket. He's like, imagine what he'll do if he finds out we're trying to run a coup. Turns out the Allfather's here. He's making this, talks about this story about like the Crusaders and like their horses that kind of weren't, loyal or whatever, having to put them down, in particular eating one. And then him and Hare start sitting there and they eat what I can only assume, because of the story, is a horse. They eat all of it. It's like, oh man. So it also seemed like his plan is to kind of kickstart the apocalypse, if I was understanding it, because it's like, oh, we'll essentially take all the nukes of all the world leaders, and it's like, the nukes, sir? So it seems like his plan is to kind of nuke the world, because the world has to burn away all the non-believers, and only the true and faithful will survive. So essentially a kind of Phoenix type of thing. Didn't say this as much, but I assume that's kind of where he's going, like rising from the ashes will be the savior Humperdinck, to kind of like lead the faithful through and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting. I guess Hare was kind of like, oh, I thought we kind of take more control. I didn't know we are going to burn the world to the ground first. But it's like, oh yeah, of course, sir. It's like, well, because it's like that kind of takes away what he kind of wanted, because it's like, yeah, you're going to be wiping out a shit ton of people doing that. And it's like, oh, it's kind of hard to kind of have that iron grasp grip that Hare wants. It makes probably doing what he wants to do a lot harder. So. And then also there comes up the conversation about, he's like, let's talk about Jesse Custer. And I'm like, that doesn't look good. The question, I mean, I don't, like I said, he knows about Genesis and stuff, but he doesn't, Hare kind of be like, oh, no, Jesse doesn't have Genesis. It's like, I don't know. Like, I mean, the Allfather might have his sources that kind of is able to, I mean, even Hare said himself, it's like, the Allfather has eyes and ears everywhere. So it's like, what does he want to talk to him about Jesse about? Is it about, the fact is that maybe he'll kind of believe Hare and be like, oh yeah, but my sources say he actually does have it. Maybe you just didn't experience. Like, how did you not know? Might turn in that conversation. How did you not know that he does in fact have Genesis? So we'll see where that ends up being. Then on the other side of things, we got our first look at Eugene. Even last season, I don't think it crossed my mind to think, all right, he doesn't know about Anvil. This is his first episode finding out about Anvil. And in all honesty, he took it so much better than I thought he would. But in retrospect, it's like, well, to be fair, like, Eugene's like a very positive person. Maybe you make the argument he's very naive, but he's a very positive person. Then it turns out he ended up getting sent to an orphanage, because in his mind, and I think I also let this slip my mind, because I feel like it never really came up too much in season 2. It's like, oh yeah, he's a very devout believer. So for him, it's like, oh yeah, God, this is all part of God's plan, which also he doesn't know that God's missing. So there's that snafu too. But it's like, oh yeah, like God's got a plan for him, that this is all for a purpose. Because for him, it's like, oh yeah, it sucked going to hell, but if I didn't go to hell, I would have been in this town too when it blew up. So it kind of worked out for him. And it's something I didn't even bring up this season. not once has Jesse thought about that Eugene thing in a while. Like, he thought of it a little bit in season 2, but that's kind of like, oh, at the end of season 1, he's like, yeah, I haven't forgotten about you. Apparently he has, like, because that never really, it came up a little bit in season 2 about the whole Eugene situation, but other than that, he hasn't really thought about it because he's so focused on the God thing. So I'm very curious to see what happens whenever they potentially cross paths again, how weird and awkward that's going to be. Like, hey, Eugene, you're out of hell. Good for you, you know? So, I don't know. We'll have to wait on that, but, that kid who was talking to him, who was like, yeah, oh, you think everything's going to be some happy fairy tale story? The fact of the matter is everything sucks. Everything in his life sucked. It's like, oh, yeah, I went with this person, terrible things happened. This other person took me in, terrible things happened. That other person, things were pretty cool there until she choked on what was like a peach core thing or whatever and just died that way. So it's kind of like, you're ugly, you're never going to get adopted or whatever, which for whatever reason in my head I was like, right, Eugene's a teenager. I forgot about that, technically. I mean, I would assume he's probably got, but what, I don't know, have they ever said how old he is? He's got to be like, what, I guess to end up in an orphanage, you got to be at least like 16 or 17 because like, it's, you know, you're not really part of the system if you're 18 years old, I assume. I don't know. But lo and behold, he gets adopted. I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. That's weird. Because I was thinking the kid he's talking to, I was like, oh, man, that's going to be his new best friend or something. Or it's going to, like, something's going to happen. It's like, who comes to pick him up? The freaking Saint. And he takes Eugene away. And then, like, the dude that's with him is like, that's some bullshit. You just got here and you already got adopted. And with the messed up face like that, like I said, Eugene being the positive person that he is, it's so interesting because he's like, Satan has got him holed up and everything, and he's like, "Oh, I believe God. It's happened. God is in everything," which is interesting because, like, obviously, that's definitely going to be an interesting parent I never thought about because the Saint has this whole situation with God. It's like, yeah, he was kind of cast away and kind of put in hell, and his family probably never be reunited with them again. But then he has Eugene being like this very positive person. I'm very interested. Sadly, we only got a little taste of that this episode. I want to get so much more of that. It's definitely going to be interesting because we know where he's going now. He's going to find Hitler, which is still the weirdest freaking thing to say out loud. But even not, Eugene's like, oh, so we're gonna walk there. He's like, honestly, I'm okay. Take as long as you need to. It's like, I'm ready to see where this journey takes us. And Saint's like, back to hell. But it kind of brings Eugene down. But like I said, he's very positive, so it's definitely going to be interesting. Let's see where that goes. Like I said, I just wish we got a little bit more of it. But just those circumstances like that is so good. Then moving on to the kind of bigger plot of the episode is like, oh, how do we, like, they're about to use Tulip, but Jesse's like, no, Tulip is very good at robbing people, so let's rob the Boyds of their soul, well, Sabina for her soul. So they fake, Tulip and Miss Marie's death. And it's so interesting because Tulip's like, wow, so did anyone cry? And it's like, TC cried. He's like, oh, it's so beautiful. And Jesse's like, you've literally died 3 times. This is like, you know, I'm really out of tears. And then she put on a blonde wig because this is part of her disguise and everything like that. I had to look it up to make sure because I thought, but I wasn't 100% sure. But I wonder, is that supposed to be a reference to her in the comic books? Because in the comic book, she's a blonde. So I was wondering, I was like, isn't she a blonde? Because I haven't really seen too many, like, images from the comic books. So I thought I remembered her being a blonde, but I looked it up. It's like, yeah, she definitely was. So I wonder if that's supposed to be like a nod to that or something. I thought that's kind of, if so, that's pretty neat. Because I'm like, why a blonde? Because she could probably have any other color hair. Maybe blonde is just, but I just feel like blonde specifically makes me go, yeah, that had to be like a nod to her and like to Tulip in the comic books. But maybe that's just me. So a lot of things went down for this break-in. Basically, you don't need a handprint or fingerprints to open up the deposit boxes. It's like, oh no, you need someone's saliva. It's like, so why do you my question is, why do you design it like a hand dent if you're just gonna lick it? Because it's like, oh, I guess you need someone's hand, and the dude just licks it. And I was like, that's weird. Why? I mean, why design it? I guess it's to fool people into thinking like, oh, you need a hand. I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of like, it'd be weird to stylize it in the form of a tongue. I don't know. So you had TC doing his thing with the petting zoo, which we see him running later on with no pants on, no underwear on, dick flopping around, running with a goat. The messed up thing about that is, it's like when the dispatcher is like calling in and they're like, we heard about a bank robbery. We don't have time. It's TC. The 2 cops look at each other and then turn around. So it's like, yeah, even this is a regular thing for him. Like, you are just weird that everyone knows about you like that. Come on, dude. And to the point that it took precedent over a bank robbery speaks volumes. Jesse needed to get Sabina's saliva for that, and that played out so differently than I thought. He's like, go ahead and spit on me if you want to, because it needs her saliva. And it's like, she's like, oh, he's like, would it be so bad for me to kiss you, wanting to kiss you after just burying my girlfriend? She's like, yeah, that would make you the most horrible person in the world. Which apparently still didn't matter. They kissed anyway. I guess even for her, no matter what Jesse did, like for her, it's kind of like a I broke your heart because I got the woman that you loved killed and killed your grandma. It's two birds with one stone. It's about the kidney thing, but like once again, Jesse's like, that was self-defense. But she's like, oh, you liked it or whatever. It's like, she didn't know that for sure. Like, not unless they had conversation afterwards about the whole situation. I mean, it could have just been like TC and Jody kind of spread that lie that like, oh, Jesse loved it. He was so excited about it, Because it's like, why would she have that perspective? Not unless that's just kind of her like, oh, he's full on Longel, and the Longels would do that. And like, I get a feeling it was more like TC or like, in particular, probably Jody, like in particular, probably ran his mouth and said like, oh, Jesse enjoyed it type of thing, But then he comes out and then Tulip's like, what happened to her spitting on you? That was the plan. He's like, well, I had to improvise. She didn't say, like, oh yeah, it's pretty lucky you had your tongue scraper with you. He's like, oh yeah, that's so lucky. I think on some level, like, and he's smirking about it. So I think he liked the fact is he's making her a little jealous. Part of me, I attribute that to probably being like that's probably him kind of getting back at her. Because I don't know, she still probably doesn't know about the fact is that Jesse knows that her and Cassidy slept together back in season 1. I don't know if she knows he knows that, so maybe that could have been a slight. I think it's a dig at that, but maybe it's unrelated. Maybe just kind of like, oh, a lover situation, or just kind of, oh, I wanted to make you a little jealous nonetheless. Maybe it's Cassie related, maybe it's not. Either way, it's kind of sad what happens to her in the end anyway. I mean, all the boys were kind of killed. Sabina was kidnapped, and she was the one that was used as a soul. Like, because initially I was like, oh, they're going to use Tulip, but it's like, no, they know if they did do anything to Tulip, like, she has to be punished, sure, but if they did do something like that, she would never get Jesse's cooperation, so that's the main reason why she didn't do it. But Sabina was the one that kind of gave her the idea in the first place, so punished her. But it's kind of like crazy. I didn't know how that was going to play out, and Jesse just popped, like, he shoots her twice and kills her. It's like, oh, because no matter what, like, at one point in time, they even talk about it a little. It's like, he liked her back then, she liked him, dude. Like, that was someone he cared about at one point in time, and he didn't, like, that someone without their soul, he's like, that's not a person anymore, and no one can live without their soul like that, because those same people, like, they were going to put her in the tombs to fight and stuff like that. He wasn't about to have someone he cared about, like, end up like that. So it's kind of interesting, like, because even the people without their souls don't turn out like the Saint. I think the Saint's kind of a special case because these people are just losing their soul. His soul, story-wise, obviously they told it in season 2, like, he screamed out and his soul, like, broke apart just because he was filled with so much rage and malice, and he just kind of went evil, and just his soul disappeared that day. So I guess it's different from just having your soul ripped out. It just kind of leaves you a hollow vessel, I guess. So that's my understanding of it, because, like, I don't know, the Saint psychopath killer, sure, but he seems okay, like, not, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what he's ultimately afraid of, like, without a soul, it's like you end up like the people in the tombs, or maybe worse, you'll end up like the Saint. So, I mean, he questioned it. I mean, I don't know if Jesse really thinks about that, like the afterlife situation for someone like Sabina. Like, if she doesn't have her soul, plus all the crazy, terrible things she's probably done too, all that time. But still, that was kind of crazy. I didn't expect that. I was kind of like, oh, I thought more would extend about that. I mean, I guess also at the same time for Jesse, it's like, in retrospect, I didn't even think about this until just now, but it's like, oh yeah, plus she's the one that sent Tulip to kill his grandma knowing it would kill her, so it's kind of like an extra middle finger to her for that. But I think it was more so out of the Mercy situation, so. We still don't 100% know what his grandma wants. Like, she's like, I'm not letting you go until you pay off your debt and give me what I want. What that is exactly, I have no idea. Like, maybe she wants, like, Angelville to kind of be back in full force. Is that what she wants? So she can collect souls? Does she want a younger body type of thing? Like, that, I guess she wants enough souls so she can go back to being younger. I don't, like, obviously it keeps her sustained, keeps her alive, but I don't know if it makes her younger. I mean, it hasn't really kicked in yet, but maybe she gets enough souls she can. What's also interesting too, because I feel like Jesse notices it, but when he opens the case from the bank, he realizes that it's like, it looked like it was in Japanese, so I'm thinking that's the Happy Soul Go-Go. I'm always blinking on the neck. Like, I kept bringing them up earlier this season. Like, yeah, we haven't seen hide nor hair of them, especially because we're dealing with this whole soul business. You'd think they'd pop up. But I assume that kind of ties in too. It must be like, no, she wants to be full force back in, like, everyone comes to Madame Maria in, in the soul game to get what they want, So I'm assuming that's what this is all about, because Jesse's like, we're going to have to call the Grail. So I'm guessing it's like they had the resources to do what he needs. So, because they don't 100% know about his situation in Angelville. They're going to leave him there, but they don't 100% know how everything works out, which is going to be interesting considering the whole conversation with the Allfather. That's going to be some interesting developments, because it's like the Allfather's asking about Jesse, and Jesse's got this situation with his grandma. It's like, how do we get out of this? Like, things don't look like they're going that well at the Grail either. So it's like, I'm curious to see how this all ends up playing out. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good